Welcome to our very first episode of the Aspire podcast. My name is Angela Armendariz, and I am the owner and CEO of Aspire Counseling. Aspire Counseling is an outpatient telehealth mental health agency that serves all of New Jersey. Our goal, our mission, is to make mental health and therapy accessible to everyone. We want being able to seek counseling to be as normalized as going to the doctor when you're not feeling well. And part of that is fighting against the barriers that keep people from receiving therapy. So at Aspire, we make an effort to have this be easy to access. So you can do therapy from the comfort of your couch and talk to your therapist on your phone, or you can pull out your laptop at your desk in your cubicle during your lunch break, or in your car on your lunch break, wherever you are comfortable. We are trying to make this affordable by using your insurance so that it's not breaking the bank to get the help that you need. We offer sessions on the weekends, in the evenings, at a time that's convenient for you. All of this is to help make therapy accessible and easy to access and to break down the barriers that get there. A big part of that is still that there's a lot of stigma around seeking therapy and getting mental health services, addressing your emotional needs. There's still a challenge in being able to say, that's what I want to do, that's what I need. And so the reason we started this podcast is because we want to normalize conversations around mental health and the insights that you can get from a therapy session. We want to make that part of everyday conversation. We should be able to have discussions around depression and anxiety and stress and challenges in our relationships and fights we've had with our kids. All of those things that are hard for us, that make day-to-day life challenging, we should be able to talk about that without any sense of embarrassment or shame or judgment. And you get that benefit from coming to therapy, but we want to bring that to the general public. We want this to be something we talk about all the time. And so the Aspire podcast is here to bring that outside of the therapy office. We're going to make this a conversation we have frequently together. And to kick off our first podcast, I'm really grateful to bring on a longtime friend and a longtime colleague, Angelica Eliazar.
I'm so excited to be here to join you on your first podcast. My name's Angelica Armendariz. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in California. And so I serve clients in California through an agency called Parent Solutions, where we have a very similar goal of providing services to all sorts of clients of different ages and different populations, different backgrounds, different capabilities, different any kind of client. We take private pay, we take Medicaid. So it's a very similar setup in the sense that we want to make it accessible to as many people. And so that's why this is also a passion project of being able to talk about mental health. And I'm excited to go ahead and kick that off here with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation and to start this podcast off this way.
People often come to therapy and they don't know what to expect. They don't know what it is that therapy is or does. And so when I have a new client that's new to therapy, that's never been in therapy, I try to frame it as what it is and what it isn't. So there is nothing magical in my chair that will change your life. Instead, therapy is a process. It's not a overnight thing like anything worthwhile. It's not an overnight thing. And so I explain to them what you put into therapy as far as how open and how honest and how much you work at it is what you'll get out of therapy. And so if you don't put the effort in, you know what? You're not going to see the results.
That's true. That's really true.
And so I frame that from the beginning that it is a process, but they are the driver. And I am simply the co-pilot. I will give them some examples and say, you know what, this turn up here, you might want to stay in this lane, or you might not want to take that turn because that ends up in a dead end. So, but ultimately it's the client who says, I do want to talk about this, or I don't want to talk about that. And that's perfectly okay to say, that's not something I'm comfortable talking about, or at least talking about yet.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, even though Angelica and I are both therapists and work in mental health, this podcast is not just for therapists. We will definitely have episodes that feature different types of therapy. And if you're in the mental health field, might be really exciting or inspiring for you. But our larger goal is to just reach the general population, to take skills and insights and ideas and new concepts that can be really helpful to anybody. So most of our podcast episodes are going to be topical. We'll be bringing on lots of different guests. There will always be someone else in our co-chair. Some of those will be therapists and experts in their field and have specific, unique areas that they serve, so they can bring something new to the podcast. We also plan to have guests that are not therapists, but people that can speak to real life mental health needs. In some upcoming episodes, we have police officers, nurses, veterans that can just talk about real life applications of things that they see and what they do and how their world and mental health often intersect. So we're really excited about that. And we're excited to have you join us along this road. Since every episode will be about a different topic, I think you'll find that there are some that'll hit really close to home. They're going to be episodes that are perfect for what you are going through. That's our goal, to kind of speak to all these different things, all these different topics. But hopefully each episode, there'll be something that you can take away that will help you feel like you're living a healthier life, that you can pour into your own well-being. So that's our overall goal, to normalize mental health, talking about it, bring it outside of the therapy office and into general everyday conversations. So one thing I wanted to ask is, along with that little tidbit that you shared about being a co-pilot and a pilot, what are some other tips that you might want to tell someone who's considering getting into therapy for the first time?
So I think with a client, I would also advise a couple of things. One of them is finding the right therapist for you.
Yeah.
Even though we're all therapists, we all have like our specialties and our niche
and our personalities.
Right.
Yeah.
And that shines through in the way that we do therapy. And just like you would hunt around for the right pediatrician for your kiddo, or you'd hunt around for the right practitioner for you, it's also finding a therapist that's going to fit you. So I recommend calling the therapist that you're interested in, asking some questions like, how much time have you been licensed, or how long have you been doing this, or what are your techniques or approaches to help make change? Like really doing your research to make sure that it fits. I also think that any therapist that is worth their salt has been in therapy. A therapist who knows what it's like to be on the other side. I think that that's a really valuable, like, lived experience to bring to the table. And to know how hard it is to talk about private things that we don't necessarily talk about with our closest friends or our family, because it just feels unsafe or awkward or uncomfortable, or we don't want their judgment about some things we might be feeling or experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest benefits to therapy, is that you get the safe place to say all the things that you can't say to just one person in your life. Even the person who is your person already has a perspective on the situation. They might know the people you're talking about. They might have strong feelings about it. Even if they're on your side, they already have a bias, really, about the whole situation. And so to have somebody who knows no one that you're talking about and who will listen completely unbiasedly and with no judgment. I've had clients say that so many times, that like, this is the only place I can really say it all. You don't have to worry about what you're saying, how it's going to affect the person you're talking to. Even you and I as friends, as we're talking, just because we're in a friendship, of course, we're thinking about, if I say this, how might Angelica hear it? Right. And in therapy, you get to throw that out the window and just really say everything you want to say without worrying about our feelings, right? Because we're not, even though that relationship is really impactful between therapist and client, it is all about what the client needs.
Right. And like, I really like that you brought up the idea of friendship, because a therapist can be very warm and be very nice and feel like a friend, but a therapist also will call you out like a friend may not.
Right.
Because the friend is interested and vested in maintaining your friendship.
Yes.
So you don't want to say things that will be offensive or taken the wrong way.
Right.
So, but with a therapist, that therapist can say, well, is that really what you meant?
Right.
I hear you saying one thing, but you're acting totally different.
Right.
Right. And I think that that is a good experience to have in therapy, to be able to have that reality check, like what is actually happening.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that those things, along with finding the style that fits for you and what is helpful in that therapist's background and their specialty areas. For example, if you speak another language, having a therapist who knows that language as well, because there's certain expressions that come out,
context and
context, culturally, you know, so having things, your experience, maybe you might be more inclined to have a female therapist or a male therapist, depending on like what your background has been. So, you know, this isn't like this is who you get. In therapy, you can be choosy and say, my therapist or the person that I want to be able to open myself up to is someone who has this experience or knows this type of therapy or knows about my beliefs of not wanting to take medication or my sense of like being part of this subgroup or subculture. And so you get to do that. And I think that a lot of people don't, they think that it's just like, well, I got this doctor on my HMO card. That's who I get.
That's who I got to go to.
With a therapist, you can shop around because it'll be worth it when you're able to stay with the same therapist instead of saying this one doesn't work and having to start over.
Right.
And I've gone through that experience. I've shopped around for a therapist, and the first therapist did not go well. Did not go well. And so she just was not the right fit for me. And so we ended up like finding something else that was a better fit.
Yeah. I always tell new clients of mine that, hey, if you don't think that I'm the right person for you, I promise that doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yes.
Right. We want people to meet their goals in therapy, right? To make the change they want to happen. And so it's not about making us feel good.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about our feelings. In fact, we encourage you to fight for what's right for you or what's right for your loved one. If you're seeking therapy for your kid or a partner, you know, we want you to argue and fight, not argue, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean? Advocate for what's best for them. And, I often encourage folks, unless you know right away, give it at least 3 sessions, right? That's kind of my rule of thumb, because sometimes that therapy experience, especially if it's your first time, can be a little intimidating.
Yes.
And even if your therapist does a great job of being warm and kind, if you're not used to sharing all, you know, it can be a little intimidating. And so sometimes that can overshadow what they think the relationship might look like. So unless it's a definite no, like sometimes you show up and you're like, this isn't for me. And then, you know, you can look elsewhere. But if it's more of that, like, hey, I'm not sure. I often encourage people, like, give it 3 sessions. And if you still don't think that there's that genuine connection, because that's really what it's about, that relationship. If you don't feel like there's that genuine connection, call the office back and just say, hey, I'd like to try meeting with someone else. And again, no one's going to judge you for that or tell you like, come on, stick with it. Like you said, it's not your assigned person. We want you to connect. On that note, can you just talk a little bit about the importance of that therapeutic relationship? Like you mentioned, it's not a friendship, but there should be that genuine connection there, feeling like someone really, truly does have your best interest in mind. How do you see that play out in the therapy setting?
Yeah. And so, you know, with clients, it's just being able to form that understanding. So I may not be in the same boat as you. I may not be going through a divorce or have a miscarriage or have had issues with my spouse or have had, you know, a tremendous financial loss, or I may not, but I know what it's like to feel lost. And I know what it's like to feel unheard in a relationship. I know what it feels. So I don't have to go exactly in those same situation to understand you and to convey that.
And to be empathetic.
Right. Yes. And to be able to foster that like sense of understanding. Yeah. And I think that also that connection is going to require, like any relationship, that back and forth. So if you don't understand your therapist or your therapist doesn't understand you, is to say, I don't get that. Tell me more about that. Or what did you mean by that? Or what does that look like? Because I don't get it. And being able to have that open relationship to be able to ask those questions, right? And so, the role of the therapist is not to say, do it this way.
Right.
Do it that way. That's not our role.
Right. That's a big misconception. I think people think therapy is advice giving, and it's not. It is not advice giving. In fact, if you have a therapist that gives you a ton of advice, maybe try a different one, because it's guidance. It's, hey, like you said before, I'm going to point out, you say you want to accomplish this thing, but you keep telling me you're doing this, and that seems to go against what you're saying. It's that third party, non-judgmental, objective perspective that can offer just a little bit of the questions to get you to think about something a different way, or maybe share a little bit of a different perspective, or offer that challenge to think about something.
Or teach a skill. Or maybe I don't know how to calm myself down when I get really worked up or really anxious. And it's teaching the skill and saying, try this, try that, it's not saying this is what you need to do. This is, try it. Come back next week and tell me, did that work?
Exactly.
Did it make a difference? And if not, let's find another relaxation. Maybe it's progressive muscle relaxation. Maybe it's imagery. Maybe it's something else, right?
Like you said, therapy isn't magic. There's not one right thing, one right skill. And so I often say the same thing to my clients, like, hey, let's try this for like a couple of weeks and give me feedback. Is it working? Is it not working? Let's throw it out if it's not working and try again. That's the other,
what is working.
Exactly. And that's another important piece, to feel like I can still advocate for myself. I want a client to come back and be like, hey, I tried that muscle relaxation thing. Didn't work for me. And I'll be like, great, thank you for that. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's come up with something else. Because something that might be perfect for you, Angelica, might not work for me.
Everyone
else.
Else.
Exactly. And so being able to have that skill building and the openness to try different things. And one thing I wanted to mention, when you said again that therapy isn't magic, a big piece of this is knowing that the real change, like the biggest changes, the impact of therapy is not what happens in the 1 hour session or the 45-minute session. It's what happens in the week in between sessions.
Everything else.
Everything else. It's, what did I take from my conversation with my therapist, and how is that going to change the way I talk to my partner? Or what's that skill I learned that I'm going to use when my boss is driving me crazy, or what's that new concept we talked about in parenting that I can immediately apply to my kiddo? Like you said, it's what you get what you take, right? Or what, sorry, let me rephrase that. You get as much as you give, right? And so if we're talking and coming up with new skills, but then I never make a change, or I never implement something, or I never try it at home, therapy is going to feel fairly ineffective, right? To see real change.
Right. I mean, you could be going to a therapist for decades and still be going for the same thing. If you're not making any of the changes that your therapist and you explore as possibilities to do things a different way.
Absolutely.
When clients come to me, what I like to say is, you hold all the pieces to this puzzle. What we do in therapy is we lay them out. I give you a space to, let's put it all, and then we can see the connections between them. We can see, oh, I react like this because when I was younger, this is how I got, attention. And when I do this with my partner, then they react like this because of how they, and then you start to see the picture.
Yes.
Not because of anything that I
not
am
because
telling
you and Angelica have all the answers.
No, the answers are actually with the client. They're the ones who hold all the pieces. They're the ones who link the things together. They're the ones who complete the picture. And so having that ability to be able to talk to someone in a non-judgmental way, that you don't feel ashamed about the thoughts and the actions that you have engaged in, but that will say, I wonder if that has anything to do with how you hold in your anger. I wonder if that comes from, anything in your past. And so that's how I like to also explain what therapy is and what therapy isn't to clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a little detour right now. I want to talk about some of the reasons why people don't seek therapy, and not only just therapy, but why we don't have conversations about mental health topics freely and often outside of the therapeutic community, right? So what are some of the things that you think are still contributing to stigma against therapeutic services, mental health in general, mental well-being? What are some of the things that still contribute to the stigma right now?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one is the stigma, is like this sense of like, if I have to ask for help, that is a shameful thing, right? Like that is shameful for me to ask, and I must not have the wherewithal.
Right. Something's wrong with me if I need that help.
Right. If I need that help. Which really is a silly idea because in every other aspect of our lives, when we need help, we ask for it, right? If you're having stomach problems or you're having any kind of other physical problems, you say,
you don't just sit there and go like, well, guess this is my life now.
I just, I must not have the wherewithal to make this, chronic stomach problem go away, right? Like you would like make an appointment with your PCP or see a specialist, a gastroenterologist. So like you would do things. Right?
Yeah.
If you were a business owner and your business is sinking, you wouldn't just say, oh, well, I just must not have. You would go to a coach. You would go
a financial advisor.
You would go to a financial advisor. You'd turn to a professional. But somehow in our culture, we've mistaken that going to a professional for help with emotional issues is seen as
weakness. It's seen as weakness.
Yeah, it's seen as weakness, a defect, or something negative within your person that you must not be able to solve it. Even though it's the same physical, chemical problems that are happening in our brain, just we can't see them, right? We can't see them. So then people just assume you must not have, like, why are you so depressed and just laying on the couch? Why you're lazy, all of these negative things, when actually that person is clinically depressed.
Right. I once saw a comic strip that compared what people say to their loved ones when they have a mental health problem versus a physical problem. And it was a comic strip. It was written out like, somebody had their been shot in the arm, and you wouldn't tell them like, well, just try harder and you'll get over this. Right. And it was a bunch of those kinds of things like, oh, I'm throwing up, and somebody else saying like, well, did you really want to go out today, or is this what you wanted to do? Right. You would never talk to somebody with a physical problem in that way. And yet somehow we're still making it somebody's fault when they're experiencing an emotional challenge, which we all do, right? We all experience those kinds of things.
Right. And it's absolutely normal within our human experience to have those emotions and those ups and downs and those transitions,
right?
And even things that you would think are happy occasions, right? Like when we welcome a new baby or when we get married
or a new promotion.
People it's still a change, and change is hard, and that's okay that change is hard. Right. If, you would ask for help to manage that change, even though it's not something necessarily negative, but adapting to change is difficult. You're letting go of something in order to get something else, right? And so that letting go can be a grief process, can be, or a transitional, like now your children are off to college and you have an empty nest. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? Even though that is
it's a
like
great thing. It's what you want.
That's the objective of being a parent. Like, you want them to be independent people.
Absolutely. That the difficulty that comes from different transitions, like you said, even a happy one, it doesn't mean that like something is wrong with you. If you're saying like, well, you know what? I wanted this baby. I'm so happy I had this baby. And yet, why am I rageful? Right. All these things. And so it's one of the reasons we wanted to start the Aspire podcast, is to be able to talk about these very normal human experiences that we all have, and be able to talk about why it's important to just, let's talk about it with each other. Let's teach some skills. We're going to bring in guests that will talk about how to overcome some of these specific transitions, not overcome them, but manage in a way that helps you move forward the way you want to move forward.
Right. I also, in reducing the stigma, or why it's important to talk about it, another thing that comes up, and, this whole thing about like the physical health and mental health parity.
Yes.
That brings to mind. And just like you wouldn't wait until, you had full blown, cardiac arrest, to say, my heart rhythm is a little bit off, or I tend to tire, I have tingling sensation. if we're able to talk about mental health outside of the therapy room, then we can intervene earlier.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
We don't have to wait until you have a heart attack to say, maybe we should do that. Or we don't have to wait till a mental breakdown to say, gosh, they need some support around this, right? Or their anxiety is getting to the point that now they're not leaving their house, or they can't, or they lost their job, or they can't, right? So if we're able to say, I feel really nervous, or I feel really upset going to work, let's intervene then.
Yes.
Instead of waiting for the breakdown.
Absolutely. And, you know, just like you said, with any problem, if it snowballs and spirals, it's much harder to solve it then. You know, you wouldn't want to wait. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't want to wait until it's swollen and infected and about to fall off before you're like, you know, maybe I should go to the doctor, right? You wouldn't do that. You would go immediately, or, you know, and so same kind of thing. We often feel like we have to wait till it's horrible. Or like you said, the breakdown has happened. The consequences of our actions are too far gone at that point, rather than coming in and saying, you know what, I just want to tell somebody that I need a little help here. And if we can decrease the stigma there and make it more okay to say, you know what, you know how I lost my job a couple months ago? I've actually been pretty depressed about it. And make that safer to say just to your friends, to your family, and to help your friends and family know how to respond to that, right? Without judgment, and to have some helpful ideas. It's going to be so much more effective than waiting until someone, let's say, is considering taking their life. Yeah. Right. And I know not every problem gets to that level, right? Not every problem hits that intensity, but anywhere along that journey, we want to be able to get in and offer healing and growth and change early on. It's much easier before you wait till the problem is exacerbated.
Right. I think when situations like that do come up, we often, you know, that 2020 vision is, you know, in hindsight. And saying, oh gosh, he did look a little down, or, you know what, he would always come to, you know, gardening club with us. And, you know, I noticed that he was out, but, you know, no one reached out, no one. And maybe that person didn't feel safe enough talking about what's going on mentally. So I think it's also a good reminder for us that, you know, some people, if they need the help, to be able to provide that like resource, or like to say, you know, and say, you know, I heard that podcast, or I heard on the radio this ad about like people, or they accept Medicaid, you know, like, it's, you know, we can get them the help and the services that they need, so that we don't have to have that hindsight. So we don't have to end up in that situation.
Yeah. And that's another one of our goals here at the Aspire podcast, is to not only equip each individual with like, hey, I want to have my own voice. I want to be able to advocate for when I have need. I want to be able to ask for help, but we also want to help give skills and tips and opportunities for you to help your friends, your family, the people in your life, your coworkers, for those exact reasons, to be able to say like, you know, so-and-so seemed a little different. You know, Fred looked a little bit more down, or he hasn't shown up to bowling, or, you know, my friend Cindy used to always laugh at my jokes and she's just seemed off. You know, we want to be able to help you recognize some of the things that might be overlooked, or, you know, be able to pinpoint, like, I think this is maybe something like an emotional challenge, and then feel equipped to know what to say. Like, how do I bring that up? How do I say that without ruining the friendship? Or, you know, one thing I hear a lot from clients when they're talking about their family or friends is that and actually I've heard this from a lot of therapists too, that there's fear that if I bring something up, I will then put it into their head that that's a problem, right? Like if I say, do you feel like you want to hurt yourself or kill yourself? That all of a sudden I've now put that thought into their head. And, you know, so we basically stay away from all the hard questions and conversations. And the opposite is true, right? We want to be able to feel like you can go to any friend and say, hey man, I'm here. Tell me what you need to tell me. No judgment, you know, and if a hard question needs to be asked, there's no worry that you're going to put that in their head or direct somebody that way. If it's not on their mind, you're not going to make it on their mind. But if it is, and you've
opened the door,
you've opened the door to help and to redirect and to say, well, man, I care and I'm here. Let's talk about it. Right. And so, you know, this podcast, there will be topics that will be focused on you as an individual. Like, what can I do when I'm dealing with this? And there's going to be topics focused on what can I do for my children? What can I do for my partner? What can I do for my friend? What can I do for the general public, right? So we're going to cover a lot of those things with the intention to equip you so you know how to even begin to have these conversations with friends and family and to recognize the warning signs.
Yeah. And, I would love to be able to live in that world where like we hold that same, like the same way that I would say, oh, I noticed you have a cast, or I noticed, hey, I noticed that, that you're limping a little bit. Are you okay? That we can say, hey, I noticed you're kind of blue lately. Or, hey, I've noticed that, you feel kind of anxious. And I think that is that whole like health and mental health parity thing, that mental health is health.
Yes, it's health.
It is health.
The word is in there.
Yes,
it is just health.
Our brain is housed within this body.
Yes.
And so taking care of your mental health is taking care of your health. Right. It's just as important as your daily walks.
Absolutely.
As your
diet.
Smart eating. Yep. Right. It's all of that, like your mental checks of being able to like do things for your mental health and self-care. So, having that perspective and shifting that's equally as important, if not more, because your brain controls everything else your body does, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think that we talk enough about the connection between physical and mental health, right? That, there's a lot of chicken or the egg, like is when you can't sleep, is that affecting your mental health, or is your mental health the reason you can't sleep? And being willing to really ask those questions and aware enough to recognize that your stomach aches, headaches, body fatigue, energy, sleep, eating, all of those things, they correlate, they affect each other, right? And sometimes one might cause the other, but then that effect makes the other worse. Like, for example, if you are feeling anxious, many of you will know this, that when you're anxious, you can't sleep at night. But so then if you wake up the next morning, you're supposed to have slept for 7.5, 8 hours, but maybe you had 3 hours of restless, nightmare-filled sleep, or just sat up all night thinking about all the things you have to do. Are you going to be able to have a great peaceful day and go to work and be really focused? No, you're going to worry more. You're going to be exhausted and irritable, and that's going to cause more challenges, so they're in such correlation, and we just don't talk about that enough.
Right. And, and because they're correlated, a positive change in one will result in a positive change in the other, right? So, one of my specialties is actually working with older adults. And a lot of older adults have chronic health issues and chronic pain and chronic, health conditions that once they learn about in therapy, like for example, relaxing and mindfulness and sleeping better and, all of that, they're better able to manage their pain, or their pain level goes down, or they also find that it helps, relieve like the symptoms or the effects of their illness. So making a positive change in your mental health is making a positive change in your health, and vice versa, right? If I'm like super depressed, a lot of the things that I tell clients is just get up and walk outside your door. I'm not expecting you to run a marathon, but just walk out the door, get some sunshine, get some vitamin D, get moving, and that will start the ball rolling, right? And so doing that for your mental health also increases your physical health. Then you're getting out, then you're talking to people that might come to your door. Like it's a spiral in all of the good ways.
Yes. And you just touched on something that I think is important to mention, is that healing, whether that's physical health or mental health, just health in general, when you're working to improve something, that is a journey. There is nothing, you're not going to show up to 2 therapy appointments and be like, well, my anxiety is cured, right? It is a process. And so often you'll hear a therapist talking to clients about, hey, let's set small goals, right? Because you're absolutely right. You're not going to wake up one day and say, you know what, I haven't ever run. I'm pretty out of shape. I think I'm going to do a marathon today. You would not do it. That
doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. You download, what's that app? Couch to 5K or whatever, you would start taking baby steps. And the same is true for mental health. And so I have heard from people like, oh man, I've been in therapy for 3 months already and I'm still struggling. That is totally normal. Right. And we often use the analogy within our work at Aspire, like, hey, it's just like working out. When let's say you start practicing a new communication skill, or you're really working on adding some positive thinking into your day-to-day routine, right? It's just like working out. You can't go down to the gym, pick up a 10-pound weight, curl it 5 times and be like, oh, my muscle is gigantic, right? You do a little bit and you go back and you go back and you do it again and you do it again, and it gets easier and you can do it more. And eventually you're right. Okay. Hey, I see the change in my bicep, right? Same thing with mental health and the skills that you learn in therapy, or hopefully the skills that you'll hear in this podcast. Don't just try it once and say, well, no muscles, right? Be willing to try it every day for a few weeks, and then be willing to try it twice a day, and then 3 times a day, and then maybe add another one. It's a lot of baby steps, and it is a journey. And as, like you said, as one thing changes, another thing we talk about in therapy a lot is that rising tide, what is it? Rising tide raises all ships, right? A rising tide raises all ships. And that meaning, if you start working on one area of your life, then others will likely get better. Just like you were saying, if I'm taking my walk, maybe my physical health and my mental health get better. If I'm making the effort to communicate more positively with my partner, then maybe we're less irritable. So we're more patiently parenting our children. Yes. And so our children aren't acting out as much because they're not dealing with our stress and responding to that. And, maybe because we had less fighting with our kids, we're going to bed at a decent time. And so then I'm waking up more rested. And all of a sudden, all these things are changing because of one area that I touched on. Yeah. Right. And not to say you shouldn't, bring up all these different things, but, progress is progress. And being willing to be patient with that process to allow for the change to really set in, and not expect that massive perfected change after one set of curls.
Yeah. And, when we talk about, changes and making changes, we can only make changes in ourselves. And I think that a lot of people think somehow we can make changes in their partner or in their school situation or, and really you can only work on yourself. You can't control what other people do or think or say. So I think a lot also what I do in therapy is psychoeducation about what it is that you can control and what it is that is not within your control.
By the way, can you break that down? We use that term in therapy a lot, but I don't, let's talk about it. What does psychoeducation mean?
So psychoeducation is the educating, like giving people information about things that affect their emotional health, right? So when we talk about what, like I'm teaching, like this is what anxiety looks like, and that's how it can be in you, but also, some other symptoms that you might not necessarily attribute to your anxiety, that's caused by anxiety, right? Like we all know, like the nervous butterflies or like the tension, but that also has, headaches and sleep disturbance and worrying and, all of this, like this feeling like something is about to happen. And you're like that, like, so giving information about what it is. So when I say psychoeducation, it's giving education about a symptom or a diagnosis, because that's not something that we necessarily talk about, in common day language, what that means. And we hear it. And so sometimes people will come in and say, I'm having panic attacks. And I was like, okay, well, this is what a panic attack is, and say, does it meet this criteria? Right. And so if it doesn't, then that's not a panic attack, right? That just means you got surprised. Yeah. Then that just means
or your anxiety was extra high that day.
But that's not truly a panic attack. But we hear those in our like on TV, and we're like, oh, that's because my spouse is a narcissist. Well, what is a narcissist? Yeah. So I'm educating people about what actually that is. And they'll say, oh, well, that's not him. That's,
And why is that important? Why is it important to make sure that we're defining things correctly?
Right. Because I think if we're putting a label on it, then that means that everyone understands it as the same way. Right. And so if it doesn't fit that label of like, that's what narcissism is, or that is what, codependency, all of these kind of buzzwords that we hear that we think we know, but we don't actually know. When you're using them with a therapist, that can have a totally different connotation.
Right. Because then the therapist might make suggestions or offer
based on
something. So thank you for defining that. I want to make sure that's one of the things I want to do in this podcast is, although we're going to talk a lot about clinical concepts, I want to make sure that it's understandable. And so breaking down some of the language that we use. So thank you for defining that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when we, it's a lot of like psychoeducation with clients to talk about what they might be experiencing or what they might be going through and helping them see things that tie into that, right? So if a client, for example, is having a hard time sleeping, but then they're on their phones until lights out, and they're and they've just had an argument with their spouse, and like all of these things, like what can you do to help yourself to get to sleep? And so like a lot of it is psychoeducation and how that works.
Right. And it's a great point. We already spoke about how a therapy session is not about advice giving, and so the distinction is if you're providing some psychoeducation, you're just offering some new information to say, can we think about it this way? Or here's how this is actually defined. Does that make sense? And so it is important to be able to have the therapist be knowledgeable about the areas that you're seeking help in so that they can provide accurate and effective psychoeducation that can be helpful.
True.
Yeah. So based on some of the things we've talked about, like the reasons people do seek therapy and the things that keep people from seeking therapy, or even talking about mental health in just a general day-to-day conversation, what are some of the things that affect the clients that come to Parent Solutions, that come to see you at your practice?
Yeah. So, Parent Solutions has been around, like we started in 2008.
Oh, wow.
And it really grew from there. And, during that time was, if you remember, we were having like a recession.
Yes.
And so a lot of people had a lot to talk about. Like there was a lot of concerns and things that were happening, and a lot of stressful situations. So we started Parent Solutions back then, and it's kind of evolved into growing and serving. At the beginning, it was mostly parents. We served parents.
Yes,
we catered to parents. And
hence
then
the name Parent Solutions.
Parent Solutions. Yeah, that's where it came from. Where we were doing in-home parenting and a lot of education and really skill sets, not just saying you should do X, Y, Z, but saying, okay, your child is here, get down on his level.
Yeah,
let's help him to calm down. So like we were like in the home, and we still have a very heavy hand in parenting where we do groups and we do a lot of court mandated stuff now. So parenting is still a big part of what we do. But we also have extended that as licensed clinicians. So I've been licensed since 2008 as well. So we've been able to evolve and have therapy sessions and serve kids, couples, family therapy. And we are on different lists for the court and on different websites. So people come to us with like court mandated things that they need to complete certain number of weeks for anger management, for parenting, for individual therapy through the Department of Family and Children's Services. So we serve a very wide clientele, as well as people that found us through like their insurance group or found us through victim witness, something like that. They've been a victim of a crime. So we also serve those types of families as well. So it's very diverse. We have a diverse team with different languages.
That's wonderful to be able to meet that need.
Right. That can serve, because how best to communicate, other than in the language that you most feel comfortable with. And so whether that's Spanish or Portuguese or sign language, like we have different modalities, different things that we do. So Parent Solutions really kind of grew out of that. And I have been fortunate enough to like be with the organization throughout that and we've had students before and we've had, different level. So in our organization, because we serve such a diverse clientele, we have a lot of different issues that we see, you know? So, we've talked about depression and anxiety being like the common cold of the mental health world, right? Like everyone gets it.
Everyone gets it.
It's normal.
Right?
There are things that, can be precipitators to that, or it could come out of the blue, right?
Out of nowhere.
Like you, just like a cold, like you say, oh, I went to that, birthday party with all the sniffling kids and I ended up getting sick, right? Or it could be, I don't know, I haven't really been out of the house and all of a sudden I came down with it. So that is how depression and anxiety works in some people. Sometimes we can trace it back to certain events.
Right. It's
and
situational, and other times
it just
happens. That's something I've heard often from folks, like, everything's going well in my life. Why am I depressed?
Right.
Or things are working out. Why am I anxious? Right. Yeah.
So anxiety and depression definitely are up there as far as what we do. And because they are the common cold, they're the ones that we've done the most research. There's different types of modalities. There's lots of different tools that work. And so working with clients that have those presentations are the most common. And that's what we see. And so it can be, there's modalities that are short term, that are much more focused on solution focused, you know, working on what works and let's go, move on from that because that's all that you need. Like this, or longer term, because there are some things from like the past that kind of catch up and, you know, are brought up again. So we have some opportunities there to do a lot of healing, right? And to be able to, so that doesn't continue to affect you, so that you can move on from that and not have it rear its head. One of the, you know, so myself, I have specialties working with older adults. Grief and loss is another one of my specialties that I help folks with a lot. And then serving clients through different like issues in their lives, transitions, and, you know, and diagnoses. And so some of our clients take meds, some of them don't, some of them want to, some of them don't, you know, so it's whatever their choice is, you know, and I respect that either way, right?
Absolutely.
Like that they are the ones who are the ones in charge of their health.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
And that is a choice.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
How about in Aspire? What do you guys end up doing and what kinds of clients do you tend to see?
Yeah, great question. So we have also a wide variety of clients. We see kids as young as 3 and all the way through, you know, we see kids, we see teens, we see young adults, older adults, and we also provide couples therapy and family therapy. So it's a wide breadth of services provided, and our different therapists specialize in different areas. Not every therapist serves all of those clients, and not every therapist, you know, feels comfortable seeing every challenge, and because, you know, you want somebody who's confident in the specific thing and well trained in the specific thing that you're addressing. And so we see a lot of folks that come in with concerns with anxiety and depression, like you said. We've seen an increase in control-related symptoms, like, you know, what people often call OCD, which, going back to your point about psychoeducation, sometimes is and sometimes isn't actually OCD, but it is control-related. So we've seen an increase in that. One of the specialties, though, that every therapist at Aspire has is a trauma focus, right? So although we're really comfortable seeing, you know, providing for almost every need, every therapist there is trained to look through what we call a trauma lens, which allows us just to recognize that the things that we go through, the tough stuff that happen in our lives, and it happens to everybody, is so impactful. And those moments and those experiences, they change you. They change you moving forward. They change the way you view the world, the way you view others in your life, and the way you view yourself. And so by addressing everyone through that kind of trauma lens and exploring with them, like maybe you're experiencing anxiety now, but what happened, you know, 2 years ago when you were in that car accident, and how is that related to the anxiety you're experiencing now? Or maybe you're struggling in your marriage, and but how does that relate to the childhood abuse that you've never talked about and experienced? And so those things connect, just like we talked about how physical and mental health are so in line with each other. You know, our history and our experiences shape how we address our current emotional challenges, right? And so coming at it through that trauma lens. So a lot of our clients come in for a specific thing like depression, anxiety, behavioral challenges, marriage counseling, and some come in with the intention to address that trauma, right? They come in and say, like, I have something I've never dealt with before, and I think it might be impacting me. So we do have clients that are seeking that. But what we find is whether or not they're seeking it, often, you know, we see a connection. So just being able to look through that lens and say, how has your life up till this moment shaped how this emotional challenge is playing out in your life? You know, and it's kind of mind-blowing how the dots connect. Just like you gave that analogy of the puzzle. And we often look at that like, oh, these pieces, they matter, right?
Yeah.
And they're all connected. And so you can't just say, well, this was this one awful thing, this traumatic, horrendous experience I had in my life. And you know what? We're just going to move that puzzle piece way over here. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. It is part of the fabric of who you are. Yeah. And it changes that. So that's something that we are really open with at Aspire, and we try to bring to every client, is that ability to look and connect their whole life together in order to make what we're working on now more effective, right? Yeah. Because as a therapist, the more we know about your experience, the more helpful we can be in that guidance, in the questions we ask, and the suggestions we make, and the psychoeducation that we provide. All of that, the more we understand, the better, the more effective we can be in that guiding process.
Right. And if I'm a potential client, do I need to know that I need trauma-informed care?
Absolutely
not.
Do
I have to say that it's a trauma? Maybe.
No. Yep. Right. That's a great question, because a lot of us don't even necessarily sometimes look at what we've been through as trauma. Right. And so, no, absolutely not. You don't have to come in thinking that's you or expecting that. Like I said, a lot of people come in just because they're fighting with their spouse a lot, or we see a lot of folks with new babies experiencing postpartum depression or anger or rage, or just the challenge of having multiple kids who are driving you crazy. Or, another thing we've seen an increase in are clients that are diagnosed with ADHD, especially clients who receive that diagnosis as an adult rather than as a kid. So we've seen a lot of increase in that. So again, our therapist team is skilled in a lot of different areas, and depending on what you're seeking is the kind of therapy that you'll be matched with a therapist who has expertise in that area. So something that's really important to us. We don't want people to feel like you said, they're just assigned somebody, or, sorry, your insurance said this person, that's your person. We really do try to ask questions and find a good match based on what someone is looking for. So I know we've talked about a lot today, and I think we're, almost running out of time. But one question I wanted to ask you before we leave since today was a little bit of an intro, and we were talking a little bit about just therapy in general, mental health in general, I still want to leave people with something to take home, some tip to be helpful. So can you offer just a little bit of wisdom on a couple of things that would be helpful to just the general public in improving their mental health right away, outside of the therapy setting?
Sure. So one of the things that when a client is very anxious, we do a lot of grounding techniques. Yeah. And so a grounding technique means a lot of times anxiety and or depression is because you're thinking about the future. You're worried, what if? And if I don't, and what could happen, right? Or we're thinking about the past,
right?
And what happened.
I can't believe
why didn't I do this? And why didn't, and I should have left that relationship, or,
Yes.
So a lot of time we're either in the past or in the future, right? And so really is to live in the present.
Yes.
Right? That's the only place that I can make a change for me now. So grounding techniques, when my mind starts reeling and starts going, one of the big things that I talk to clients is about using techniques to ground them where their body is at that moment, right? And so a technique that I really like is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique.
I love this one. Yes, please share.
So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique is a technique where you, let's say like my mind is reeling and I'm feeling very anxious. I need to get back in my body because I'm thinking about a gazillion other things that make me feel keyed up and anxious. So what I'm going to do is 5 things that you can see. So I'm going to name them. I see this color. I see this tree. I see this bird. I see, 5 things that I see that in the environment that I am now, whether that environment is in your home, in your car,
in your office,
wherever you might be.
Yeah.
What are 5 things that I can see? And then then I named 4 things that I can hear.
Yep.
So what do I hear going? I hear the car horns. I hear
my computer buzzing.
Yes. Yeah. I hear the clicking. I hear, what are 4 things that I hear? all of those are meant to focus you on the here and now through all your 5 senses.
Right.
So then 3 things. What are 3 things that I can touch or feel? Right. So like I can feel the weight of my cup.
Right.
I can feel the coolness of it. I can feel the
AC
fabric.
blowing down
the
on
AC
me.
on.
Right.
You know, and you will notice that as you start to focus on these other things that are in the room with you, you can't be also focused on the thing that's making you anxious. So then 5, 4, 3, 2. And then what are 2 things that I can smell?
Yes.
So what are 2 things, I smell, people are warming up their lunches in the lunchroom.
Yeah. The coffee brewing in the other room.
The coffee brewing, right? Or this is a new Sharpie that, I smell the Sharpie. Yep. I smell, whatever it is.
The hairspray I put in my hair this morning.
Whatever it might be. And then what is one thing that I can taste, right? So like you can pop a piece of gum or you can, have a drink of your, whatever you're drinking or have some water or, what are some things, because all of the 5 senses, you're grounding yourself where you are now. And so there is no negative repercussion from trying this, right? And so like the more all the senses tell you, hey, you're here, right? You're safe. Yes. You're okay. You're not there. And you're not back there. Here.
Right. Yeah. And if you notice
that is one of the things that I really highly recommend to a lot of clients.
I love it from
the get-go.
I love that it also gets harder as that technique goes on, right? Like it's harder to come up with 2 things you can smell than it is 5 things you can see. And that's meant, also pulls the focus from all the thinking of what could go wrong and all the thinking about what did go wrong. Right. And it pulls your brain, the energy of your brain, the focus of your brain into really concentrating on what can I smell, right? Yeah. And I love that technique. I use it personally. I encourage a lot of clients. For those of you that have kids, we also have a kid version, which we just call 3, 2, 1. And you just have them do 3 things they can see, 2 things they can hear, and 1 that they can touch. It's a little simpler, easy to remember, faster for them, but it still has that same effect. It pulls them into the moment because kids get anxious too, right? That's not an adult struggle. That is an everyday struggle. Kids get anxious as well. And so helping them learn early on how to start pulling themselves into the present, into that here and now is really effective.
So when I want people to have tools when they leave the office, something that they can use that's different. So like that's a tool that I like talk to them about. But as far as like something that could be better for them, it's always like exercise. Yeah. Exercise has... exercise really is the best, at releasing certain negative feelings and also having time for yourself, releasing those positive endorphins. Of course, everyone is going to define what exercise is. Right. And you'll have to talk to your medical provider about like what's safe for you and your body. But increasing exercise, whether that's a walk around your neighborhood or running around
or
jump
exercises, right?
Jumping with your kids in the trampoline. Like it doesn't have to be like at the
I
gym.
went to the gym or I took a 2-mile run around the neighborhood. Right.
It could be like jumping on the trampoline
taking
with your kids.
dog on a walk
or taking your dog on a walk. Yeah. Anything that like will get your heart pumping. And there's like, multitudes of like studies that have been done of how it's effective. It's
like the best antidepressant. Studies have shown like exercise can be more effective than other medications even to decrease depressive feelings. It's just, you're absolutely right. Moving your body is so powerful. And it's a great tip. It's something we can all do.
And it harnesses that like mind body connection, that making a change in my physical body also clears my mind, also helps me with my brain fog. Like it helps my emotions, they are intricately linked.
Yes. And going back to something we spoke of earlier, don't hear that and feel like now you need to run the marathon, right? Baby steps, right? So if your level of activity is pretty low, start with just a 5-minute walk, right? Like you don't have to feel like for it to be effective, I need to die. I need to kill myself in a workout, right? I have to... what was that? I used to do Tai Bo back in I'm not going to say how long ago, but and you just fall on the floor. It doesn't have to be that. It can be anything that can simply increase that physical movement in your body. And I love that connection between the mind body. Yeah. That's a wonderful point.
What are some takeaways that you recommend, or what are some things that people can start to practice that are different now?
This might sound cheesy, but I'm going to share it anyway. One thing we focus on a lot is finding either areas to be hopeful about or grateful for, right? If you can choose to be grateful about something, it can really put the stress of life into perspective. And often we know that because our stress is so high, and especially if we're dealing with things like depression, anxiety, difficulty focusing, challenges in our relationships, when we feel those things, it's really easy for everything to seem challenging and everything to seem hopeful. And so whether you everything to seem hopeless. Whether you open a notes app in your phone and write down, like, every day I'm just going to say one thing that I'm grateful for, or one thing that I'm looking forward to, right? To build either that sense of gratitude or either that sense of hopefulness. Or maybe it's having a friend that you text back and forth with and share your one thing, or, your partner that you say, hey, stick with me. My therapist said this cheesy thing, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to tell you one thing I'm grateful for every day. Yeah. Any way to incorporate that, I can't tell you what an amazing mental shift that can lead to. How that can just put things in perspective, where it doesn't mean that the challenges don't go away. It doesn't mean that the challenges go away. It doesn't mean that stress isn't stressful and that you're not still fighting with your partner or hating your job. It doesn't negate those things, but it can lighten the load, because all of a sudden things can be in a little bit more balance. It can feel like it's not the only thing in your life. So building and it's just like building any kind of muscle, the more you concentrate and intentionally identify things that you're grateful for, the more naturally that thought process just takes root in your brain, right? You're developing a new neural pathway or strengthening a neural pathway, so that rather than your brain naturally jumping to an anxious thought, it might actually next time jump to a happy thought or a gracious thought, because you've put the work in to just start thinking more intentionally that way.
Right. Or even just a more neutral thought, not necessarily positive, but just more neutral instead of it being so negative. I really like that. And when I talk to clients, I say, you're going to find what you look for.
Yes.
So if you look for what's going wrong in my life, you're going to find that.
Yep.
But, I challenge them to find about what's going right.
Yes.
What is good? What is, grateful?
Love that.
And so some clients tell me gratefulness, that feels kind of funny because I don't have like a higher power. Like I don't do that. Like, would that work with someone?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be grateful to a higher power. It can just be something that I'm thankful for, that I'm stressed at my job, but I'm glad that I have a job. Right. Or, maybe I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage, but my partner and I are in it together. Right. It could just be something that I'm thankful for. And it just provides a little bit more of that balance.
Yeah. So, when you talk about neural pathways, and those are connections between your neurons, like your brain physically changes by being grateful.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
It's so impactful, and it's such a simple thing to do. But again, when you're in the thick of it, if you're screaming at your family's all fighting, or you're feeling depressed, it can be hard to even think of one, right? Like, true. So it's not to minimize that when we're in the thick of it, that can be a hard strategy to implement. And so, like I said, as you do it more, it gets easier and easier, but to start out, just challenge yourself to one. Just, what is one thing I'm thankful for? And sometimes I tell people, like, it might just be your cup of coffee that day. I am thankful for this shot of caffeine and the delicious vanilla creamer that I put in. And that may be all that I can come up with that day. But that's something, right? That's something. And even that can start shifting your brain, can start shifting the way you feel about the day and the way your brain starts thinking about the day. So just one little thing, even if it is a small thing, it can still be really impactful.
Because then you start looking for that thing. You're saying, I have to come up with something new tomorrow, and I have to think about, my therapist is going to ask me when I see her next week. So what are something, and you start looking for it. You start thinking, I got that parking spot near the front, or good thing it stopped raining after I got home, things that you're thankful for and grateful for.
It just gets easier and easier to start seeing them and to start experiencing them, and allowing that to lighten the rest of your load. Yeah.
Do you share any other techniques with clients about what they could do?
Yeah.
Or some takeaways?
Yeah. Another really simple takeaway that we talk about with almost every client, again, is it's really simple in practice. It is just the importance of taking a couple of deep breaths. Anytime we're feeling high emotions, even happiness, actually, even anytime your emotions feel slightly out of control. Most often we feel this with anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, nervousness, those kind of high emotions. Your body actually gets dysregulated, right? Like your nervous system is upset. Your body is really out of whack. Again, that mind-body connection is really impactful. And so just slowing down and taking a couple of deep breaths can slow your nervous system, which can allow you to think in a different, more productive way, right? Like and we'll talk about this actually in an upcoming episode because it's an important topic, but when you're feeling those big emotions and your body becomes dysregulated, you aren't really able to problem solve. Your best thinking isn't applicable to you. Like you can't access it in those moments. So taking a couple of deep breaths just to slow down your nervous system, to bring all of the brain functioning back online, can help you then handle that problem, handle that big challenging moment a little bit more intentionally, productively, and more likely more positively. Yeah. Right? You're responding rather than reacting. And so just a couple of deep breaths. And there's a lot of cool ways to do that. You know, you can look up, again, there's not one right way. There's so many different techniques, box breathing and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and drawing a rainbow. And we do different things. We encourage kids to take part in deep breathing in different ways and adults to take part. But it doesn't have to be anything intense. It can just be, I'm just going to take 3 deep breaths, right? And just start there.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense because I know that when I get worked up or, you know, I notice that like my breathing becomes more shallow, right? Like you don't breathe as deeply. And so when you are intentional about breathing deeper, it also then I can't help that when I breathe deeper, my shoulders also like I notice
your
like,
heart
you know,
rate slows a little bit.
And so there are physical changes that happen within your body and your brain to be able to, you know, with just a few deep breaths.
Just a few deep breaths. There's so much impact there. It gives you the time to think about what you were about to say or yell, for example, right? Instead of yelling at my kid, I take a couple of deep breaths and it's like, well, let me offer a choice here. Or, you know, it just gives you the time to slow down, calms your physical reaction, allows you to think more productively about how you want to handle that moment, not how it's handled, but how you want to handle that moment. Yeah. And Angelica, I am so grateful that you came on today and kicked it off for our first podcast. Thank you so much for being here, for actually flying in all the way from California. It's just such such an honor to have you. And I'm just really grateful that you came.
Of course, it's been my pleasure. And, you know, there's a great resource in this community. And if there's anything that I can do to like promote it and have people have access to it, that's what it's about. That, you know, we are definitely in this field, not because of the money. We're not here because we want to get rich. It really is a passion, you know, and a mission of ours to like spread that awareness and be able to be agents of change for others and to, you know, have people be their best selves.
Be their best selves. Absolutely. That's right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation and helping us kick this off. So thank you guys for joining us, for listening or viewing today for our first Aspire podcast. If you're interested, please like, subscribe, follow us. You'll see all of our social media below. You'll find links to everything. And we're really excited to go on this journey with you. Thank you for joining us today, and we can't wait to see you next time.